Hi, everybody. I'm Jackson Jones, and welcome to another webinar from the Biker Bar. There's a whole lot more webinars to come, so check out the Biker Bar website and subscribe to the monthly newsletter so that you don't miss any live events. In today's webinar, we're talking to Craig Muirhead. Craig's a flow performance coach, helping motorcycle racers transform their mental approach to their racing. He coaches in the principles of optimal performance in the flow state, which is helping riders to increase their performance and taking their racing to the next level. So over to you, Craig.
Hi, everybody, and I'll get started now to explain who I am and what I do. So first and foremost, my name's Craig Muirhead, and as Jackson said, I'm a performance coach. And if you were in another sport other than motorcycle racing, you'd have got used to a performance coach very, very often and early on in your career. So sports like tennis, athletics, golf and swimming, to name just a few, are recognizing that you can't get that much extra out of a racket or out of a club. But the real differentiator is what the player can bring to the game. And so the performance aspect of the player being at their optimum has been in those sports for quite some time. And motorsport's a little bit behind that, but it is catching up pretty quickly. And in motorcycle racing, we do see it a little bit different, or we have done up until now. So what tends to happen is we start off simply by enjoying our riding. We're normally pretty talented and good at it from an early age. We start to ride the bike and we enjoy riding the bike. And then what happens is we start to then get competitive. We start to think, oh, it might be interesting to get on a track, or it might be interesting to do a race. And then that competitive edge starts to grow. And then what happens right across the sport is everybody looks for the best bike to be on. And that's really our differentiator when it comes to motorcycle racing, is that we're looking for the best kit, and the best kit will give us the best advantage over our competition. And so what that really means is that ultimately, when everybody is on the same kit, everybody's put the same resources in, spent the same amount of money, they're all training to be fit, they're all on a diet, what's the differentiator then? How does somebody separate themselves from being an also-ran to actually being at the front of the pack? And that question we're going to come back to a little bit later on. So we'll keep that in mind and we'll come back to it. So you might be thinking, who the heck is Craig Muirhead? So let me tell you where I am and how I got to here and my background. So to begin with, up until 2016, you'd have actually found me working in the commercial side for manufacturers such as BMW and Aprilia. And I turned 50 in 2016, and this is a picture of me actually at the bike show at the NEC, working for the Piaggio group for Aprilia. And you can see from my body language there that I'm not exactly enjoying my lot at the time, arms folded, head down. And I really didn't enjoy it. And I turned 50, and 50 is one of those milestone years where you think, what am I doing and why am I doing it and whatever else. And so I decided I wanted to make a change, but I didn't know what that change was going to be. So what I did was I resigned from my job and I actually went for a walk, and I went for quite a long walk. I went on the Camino de Santiago, which is a walk across Spain. So you start off in San Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is in the south of France, in the foothills of the Pyrenees, and you walk all the way across northern Spain. And you go to Santiago, which is the initial walk, and I actually walked on to Finisterre, which is at the coast, and that was 550 miles in old money, or 885 kilometers in new money, and that took me 6 weeks. And I'm not a walker, so it's not like I go off, doing the Peak District or the Lake Districts every weekend. So I only bought my boots a week before I went on this walk. So thankfully, I didn't get any blisters either, which was good. But I had a great time. I met a lot of people, and I obviously had the time to really reflect on my life and what I wanted to do moving forward. And what I decided is that I wanted to help people, help them achieve their goals. And so coaching and that realm of coaching sort of came up as my future vocation, if you like, to take. So when I came back to the UK, I trained in London to be on the principles of coaching, and I opened then Camino Coaching. So Camino from the walk, and obviously coaching because that's what we do. And Camino Coaching was born at that point. And I started off working in businesses. So I worked with business leaders and business owners on their objectives, but it was very similar to my previous roles in business development. So I didn't really get any payback from it. I didn't get any real buzz from achieving their extra 3% on their spreadsheet at the end of the quarter. So at the end of September 2017, I coached myself and said, okay, if you don't want to work with these types of people again, who do you want to work with? And I said to myself that I want to work with a racer that's lost his mojo, and I'm going to try and help them find a second lap. And so from that point onwards, all of the people that I knew in the motorcycle world became good contacts to start to talk about racing and who was racing and manufacturers, etc. And I went to British Superbikes in September 2017. This is Sam Wilford, who was racing in 600 Supersports. And Sam had just come back from a pretty bad injury, so was a little bit low on confidence and wanted to be able to build himself back up again and get back up to speed. And so we started to work together from that point onwards, and we still work together now. And we'll come back to Sam in a little moment. But literally from that point onwards, I started to then go away and train again on the principles of flow and the principles of performance, because obviously we all are looking to increase our performance, but we don't necessarily know where that comes from. And it feels a bit mystical. We have one great weekend where everything just clicked and it felt fantastic. And then we're thinking, all right, next weekend I'll do that again. This will be superb. And guess what? We get back there and nothing works. We're in struggle and it's hard work and nothing clicks the following weekend. So it feels very mystical. And so what I did was I went away and I trained on the principles of flow, and I'm still training. It's not something that you can just go, I did my course and I know everything, because everything's still evolving. And so we're still working and developing on the neuroscience of what's actually going on when we perform at our highest levels. But from that point of working at the British Superbikes, we then recognized that from my background, I'd done some racing, but I wasn't trying to be a rider coach for anybody. This is me back in Dubai racing R6s. And so the difference is I know the difference between a good weekend and a bad weekend, but I'm only looking at the mental approach to racing, not the technicalities that a rider coach would do for you. So it was a bit of a separate area to what people were normally working on. Not everyone works on fitness, and most people work on some technique, but not anybody was working on their mental approach to the racing. So now, if we fast forward to 2022, I'm working with races in the most demanding race series on the planet. So British Superbikes, definitely one of the hardest domestic championships on the planet. Red Bull Rookies, CEV, which is the Junior World Championship, and MotoGP, which obviously is the World Championship. So I'm working with riders in each of those paddocks. In MotoGP, I'm working with Sam Lowes. We worked with Sam Lowes last year and started working with him in 2020. And then also this year, Joe Kelso from Australia, who's starting in his rookie year in Moto3, and also Josh Watley from the UK, who's also in his rookie year with Moto3 as well. So we're working together in the season for in MotoGP paddock. And then also in the Junior World Championship, I'm working with these three guys who are all in the same team. So Sam Wilford, he's now changed to red from green that you saw earlier. So he's racing in the European Moto2 Championship. And that's really the feeder class into Moto2 World Championship. On the left, you've got Cormac Buchanan from New Zealand, and he's racing in Red Bull Rookies and also in the European Talent Cup. And on the right, you've got Torrin Collins, and he's racing in the Junior World Championship Moto3. So those three guys and the guys in the World Championship, I'm working with one-on-one all the way through their season. And that's how we approach it. So what's actually happened over the last 5 years is that we've been able to understand what racers do when things are going well. And what they do is they get superstitious. There's no real science in this. I put my left boot on first. I get a fist pump from a friend who gave me a fist pump when I got on the podium last time. And obviously, we know that Valentino Rossi was full of his rituals, and we're not quite sure why he wants to fiddle with his undergarments every time he went out. But the superstition is that it went well once, and we just hope that it will go well again. And obviously, there isn't any real science to that. And people that have got their rituals will be in various levels of performance for each weekend. So we know that superstition doesn't help, but people still do it. The left boots and the lucky underwear are always being worn right across the paddock. And then we also had a look and started to understand over the last 5 years what racers do when things are not going well. And what they do is they get frustrated. Okay, frustration creeps in that they are not tapping their potential, they're not getting the results that they should get. Maybe it's the amount of investment they've put in, maybe it's the people around them that feel they should be doing better than they're doing. And that frustration then leads them to trying too hard. And when we try harder, we actually go slower and we make too many mistakes. So what then happens is it adds to more frustration, and it ends up being a bit of a vicious circle that we are got no idea how we're going to be getting back to our winning ways again, and we're just more frustrated and still going out and trying too hard. And then what happens is that we go into change mode. We literally go, just like Lorenzo did when he moved from Yamaha to Ducati to Honda, exactly the same. We go into changing the bike. Let's see if a different bike's going to make it easier for us. Let's see if different tires manufacturers will make it easier for us, or it's even the people around us. Or it could even be the championship that you're racing in. We're looking for a fresh start, for a fresh opportunity where we can start from scratch and start to get back to winning ways. But what tends to happen is after all that time and money is spent on changing all of those things, and we still don't see any improvements, then we start to maybe accept that something else is at play and there's something else that's the cause. So everything else has changed, but the one thing in the middle is the rider, and that hasn't changed at all. And so that's really where my training comes in, when people are ready to go, okay, I've tried everything and now need to start to work on myself. And so basically what we look at right across the paddock and also in life is that we have two mindsets. And those mindsets are split basically from our background and from our understanding of the challenges that we're dealing with. So the first one is really, really common in the paddock, and it's a fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset comes from being told that we're a natural, being told that we're talented, look how easy it is for you. And so we feel like we can just carry on doing the level that we're doing and always achieving because we're a natural and we're talented. So as soon as we get to a point where we're not performing very well, guess what? It can't be us, because we've been told we're natural and we're talented. So it must be something else. So that change mode is actually generated from people being made a fixed mindset from the people around them from when they're growing up. It could be grandparents, it could be parents, it could be a school teacher, it could be anybody that's saying, oh, look how good you are and you're so talented. And actually it's creating the wrong environment for you to actually be able to perform at your highest level. So when you're in a fixed mindset, you actually are trying to protect yourself from looking bad all of the time. So that's the worst thing possible for a fixed mindset, is actually to get a bad result. So they then see that a bad result is a direct reflection on themselves. So it means that if I get a bad result, and it means that I'm a bad rider. That then means that it's a direct reflection on who they are, their self-worth, their motivation. Everything becomes a bit of a domino effect from that point onwards. And that's, as I say, really popular and really common inside the paddock. You can also get it from teams. You can get like a team that said, well, we created a championship winning bike 3 years ago, so it can't be us. It must be the rider that means that we're not performing as well. So that's a fixed mindset coming from that side of it, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the rider. And when you start to be aware of fixed and growth mindsets, you really do start to spot them really, really quickly. Now, the opposite side to this, the other mindset, is the growth mindset. And a growth mindset believes that they are not their outcome. Their outcome is the result of their hard work, their practice, and their efforts, all of which can be adjusted and increased. So if I'm not getting the results that I want right now, I can put in more practice, I can put in more hard work, I can put in more effort to be able to change those results. So the growth mindset is actually a position where it's feeling that it's in control of the situation. And it isn't all just down to fate or down to talent, because guess what? The fixed mindset can't bring double the talent next weekend, but the growth mindset can bring double the work. And that's the real difference. One's in control, whereas the other one feels a little bit like I can't do anything about it anyway. So we're in a real situation of our training to generate more growth mindsets about challenging situations. When it's going well, everybody's in a good mindset. Everybody's high-fiving and everyone's great. It's when we get to the sticky times, it's when it's tough, that's the time when we've got to choose our mindset and choose how we're going to approach it. So what we've got to recognize from that viewpoint is that your thoughts affect your feelings affect your actions, and your actions affect your results. They create your results. And so what is actually happening is, when we were saying it was all mystical before about your performance, actually when you reverse engineer it and say, right, my results were, I was 15th, okay, well, what were my actions like? Well, I was riding a bit tight, I was tense, I was nervous. Okay, what was my feelings about the track? I don't really like that track. I don't like that section of the track. I've never gone well there. Okay, so then we'll work it back. So those feelings are based on our thoughts of the track. And so we can actually see that each of the results that we get, good or bad, are actually down to this process of how we feel and think about something will then dictate how we act with it, and that will create our results. So again, it puts us in charge of our performance when we start to fine tune this. And obviously that's what we do in the training as well. So we're just going to have a look at an example here. So if we take a fixed mindset to begin with, and the fixed mindset is a little bit of a victim. They're a victim of circumstances. And let's take the example that they were beaten on the line. They're sitting in third place. They're going to get the first podium of the season. They're already sipping the champagne in their head. They're already getting the plaudits and the pats on the back. And then literally in the last couple of corners, they get caught up by somebody and they get overtaken and they end up being fourth. Okay, so they miss the podium. So they're beaten on the line. That fixed mindset rider will be disappointed, frustrated, and angry. We're not there to not get on the podium, so I can understand them being frustrated, but ultimately they're also going to be connected to that bad result, to the fact that they don't want to look bad, and this could make them look bad, so that they're not going to be happy with that. They're going to be angry about it, and what they then move into is they move into the blame game. They've got to find a reason why it happened, because it can't be me, I'm a natural. So they go into the blame game with, the pit board should have told me earlier that there was somebody closing down on me. There was a back marker in the way. They've got to come up with some reason why it happened to them. Again, they're a victim of circumstances. And then finally, they end up wrestling with reality. This should have never happened to me. They beat themselves up both mentally and verbally, and the people around them. And they only focus on the poor results. They don't want to talk about it. Somebody says, how did your weekend go? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. They literally are shutting themselves down and are in a bad mood until they get a chance to reset before they go out for the following race weekend. And that's typically how a fixed mindset would deal with it. If we look at exactly the same situation from a growth mindset, which is more of a creator of his environment, he's equally beaten on the line, he's equally lost out on the podium, and he will be disappointed, but he hasn't, or she, sorry, it could be a she, they haven't got the same attachment to the result that the fixed mindset had. They're a little bit more objective rather than emotional about it when you're in a growth mindset. So you're disappointed, but you've got this non-attachment, which means that you can start to look at what happened and to ensure that you've learned something to make sure it never happens again. So they actually go into an investigation about, right, okay, well, where did he start? The guy that beat me, where did he start? Well, he was actually behind me, okay, so, and then he caught me up with 3 laps to go. So I've got to make sure that I don't sit in third. I've got to make sure in the next race I'm pushing my way forward to second and not giving them an opportunity to bridge the gap on me. So they're actually going away with a solution to the issue to try and avoid it happening again. And that person has learned from the situation, whereas the fixed mindset hasn't learned anything. He's just going away, blaming everybody else and doesn't want to talk about it. So there's a real difference in how a growth mindset deals with exactly the same situation. So when we've got the right mindset, we actually can't lose. We either practice what we need to learn or we learn what we need to practice. And that's a great way to, I didn't invent this quote, by the way. It's actually from an American football coach, but it's absolutely spot on in the fact that if we are always gaining from the experience, if we're always gaining some lesson and some area to develop and grow, we're always improving our performance, which is a great place to be. So getting back to the question that we had earlier on about what do we do when everyone's the same, is that we've got to put in more work than they do. That's the only real differentiator, is how much effort we put in to improve. If we want to be better next weekend than we were last weekend, then that's where the potential and the growth is. Whereas if we're quite happy where we are and we're not really all that sure whether it's worth the effort, then guess what? We're going to be still in the same place that we were in the previous weekend. And this is also a great quote from Laird Hamilton, the surfer. And basically he's saying there that make sure your worst enemy doesn't live between your own 2 ears, because our brain is either going to be our best ally, it's going to help us with all these extra elements and these new aspects and concepts that we've got to increase our performance and find the advantage over our competition, or it's going to be our worst enemy. It's going to be an anchor that's holding us back. And it's about us making sure that we're in the right situation. And when you change the way you look at things, so like we said before about, maybe you don't like the circuit, maybe you don't like, a sector in that circuit, which means you ride a bit tighter and you're a little bit, not as loose as you need to be. When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. So all of a sudden we see an opportunity in the track that we're going to, rather than in the previous history, that some reason we think that previous history will just make our new future, and that isn't true. When we change the way we look at it and change our approach, we can absolutely change the outcome. And I've had a lot of people in the training that have had a bogey track, they've had a track that I've never gone well at, but when we've changed the way they look at it and we've changed what their objectives and their goals are, they've really been able to get tremendous results from that bogey track. So up until 2020, I used to work one-on-one with riders. We'd go to the circuit, we'd do all the work prior to the race weekend, but I'd be working with, a few riders at each of the events. And then obviously with COVID in 2020, when there wasn't the same access, I actually moved all of my training onto online. So it meant that people in Australia, New Zealand, America, all of Europe, India, even South Africa, have been able to then get started on the training and be able to get the same benefits without me having to be there. So that's obviously available for anybody else that's watching this that may be interested as well. And I'll show you a little bit more about it now. So it's just like Netflix. You literally just jump on to a daily video recording about a specific topic related to your performance. And it's about 10 minutes long, because we don't have very good attention spans anymore. After around about 15 minutes, we tend to wander off. We've had 3 pings on our phone and we're looking for something else to do. So just getting it down to one topic a day and 10 minutes is a really good way for you to learn new concepts. And then it's all about applying it to your race weekend. And so whether you're racing at a high level, whether you're racing when you're just starting out, whether you're a track day user who's looking to start to do his first year of racing, there's a level of training that absolutely matches your level of riding. And these are the three levels that basically we work at. We've got a separate Riders Academy, which is for the younger rider between 12 and 17, where they're in the Talent Cups or they're in the Junior Championships. And they're very competitive. So to be in there and deal with all the elements and the stresses and strains of that, it's a little bit separate, and we have a separate program for them. We then have Performance Principles, which is the main course, which is for people that are racing at a national level. So they're in a national championship, and they're racing and getting the training for that. And then we've got a peak performance, which is really people that are now moving to a pro rider. So the people I showed earlier that are in the Spanish Championship or in the World Championship or in the peak performance training program. And let me just touch on the performance principles for you, just to show you how it works. We'll just fly through it. So literally we have week by week, there's a training module each day. So the first week is literally the performance principles. It's the key areas of what we are doing, the loops and the habits that we get caught up in that are actually costing us our performance that we're not even aware of. It's a bit like learning a new language. You don't know what that word means until somebody tells you what that word means. So you don't know that you're doing something to block your performance until somebody points that out. So you think you're doing everything the right way around, which is absolutely superb, but guess what? It's actually further down the line causing you a block in your performance. So understanding those principles, understanding where the flow comes from, where you're in that more subconscious level that you're able to just do what you're doing rather than having to think or overthink or overstress about what you're doing. When you think about it, you ride subconsciously. You don't think about 5 bar of pressure to pull yourself on the brake down to the hairpin. You naturally feel for the right amount of brake. And if you need a little bit more, you just ask for a little bit more. And that's all subconscious. And it's actually where we want to get you to. We want to dull down that overactive judging conscious brain, and we want to get you back to that subconscious where it just clicks and you feel good and you're more intuitively riding. That's when you ride at your best. So those performance principles, that first week is absolutely getting you back to that space. The next week is based on warm-up and preparation. A lot of everybody basically before they get on a bike, if they're at a racetrack, will do some limbering up. They'll do some stretching to make sure that the body and the muscles are ready, but they don't do anything to actually warm up the brain and make sure the brain is activated to be able to go and perform. And so a lot of times people will go out and they'll go, I was just getting up to speed and then the checkered flag came out. And I've sort of missed my opportunity in that session. And that's because we haven't got both sides of the brain activated. So we've got some warm-up and preparation techniques that help you be completely warmed up and ready so that you literally from the outlap, you're already performing rather than waiting until the checkered flag comes out. And then into week 3, we've got some actual tools that we use on the bike. So we've got some things that we're focusing on when we're out on the bike to be able to give ourselves more references, because it's references that you use when you're actually going faster subconsciously. We then move into goal setting. And goal setting is massively important for your performance. If I ran down any grid, everybody's waiting to go with a couple of minutes to go, and just literally asked everybody, what's your goal, what's your goal, what's your goal? 99% of the riders on that grid would say, I'm just going to see what the first laps are like. I'm just going to see how it feels, and then I'll decide. And that's no way for your performance, because we're actually waiting a little bit like a victim of circumstances. We're actually waiting for everything else to fall into place for us to then go and get a good performance. For flow, you actually need to be setting the right goals. And so we have a full week on understanding what those goals are and how they help us perform. We then move into mental rehearsal, because once we've set a meaningful goal, we can then mentally rehearse it. If we haven't got a goal, it's very, very hard to rehearse that. So they're connected, absolutely. And then we move into the belief system. And if you can imagine, if you've set that meaningful goal, you've then done the preparation of mental rehearsing, you overcoming all the things to achieve that goal, that massively impacts your belief system. So you're in a stronger place. It doesn't mean it's all going to go to plan. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go your way, but it means that you're prepared and you're ready to go to battle with what you want. And that's the difference than the guy who's just getting his bike out of the van going, fingers crossed, let's see how this weekend goes. So you're in a better space to be able to perform, and your belief system is working. Like we said before, it's become an asset for your brain rather than an anchor that's holding you back. Then we move interactions. We move into interactions, and interactions is all about how we interact with people and events. It isn't actually the event itself that gives us an emotional connection to anything. It's the meaning that we give it. And when we change the meaning, we can then change how we see things. And that, again, gives us some power over the things that are happening around us that we can't really control, we can't really get affected by. But guess what? They're taking our energy, they're taking our attention, and they're also costing our performance. And then finally, we're into the race weekend structure, because the downtime at a race weekend is actually a really tough area for us to manage, because most people 10 minutes before they need to go out on the bike, they are switched on and they're ready and away they can go, and then the time they're on track is fine. But then they might have an hour or two before they're back out again. And what that means is they're talking to friends, they're on their phone, they're generally, away from any performance. And we need to be able to flick the switch to move ourselves back into being ready to perform again. Whereas most people, it's a mechanic or a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend that's actually getting on the bike because they've been in that space, and then, oh, I'm out in 10 minutes, put my helmet on, out I go. And that's not a very good space for us to be in. So having a race weekend structure is really, really important to be able to manage your downtime and have you switched on and primed to be able to perform at your best. And then finally, a debrief. We send in a debrief at the end of each session. It's on your phone, you send it back to me, and that is literally you grading yourself on the key elements of your performance. We'll talk about the bike and what the bike needs. Its suspension needs this, or the tire needs that. And we wouldn't dream of leaving the bike leant up against the wall for 20 minutes and then just getting back out on it and hoping it goes faster. We'd actually be spending some time on the bike and giving it what it needs. And this is exactly the same with what we do with the rider. Whereas the majority, I guess what, the rider gets no attention and it's just fingers crossed when we go back out again. Whereas we're working on where was our focus, where was our level of distraction, how relaxed were we? We're asking ourselves the key indicators that are connected to your performance. So that helps coach you on what to focus on the next session that you go out. I then send you feedback, and that literally becomes the goal for the next session. So rather than you doing a course in April 2022 and going, oh, I've got to remember what I should do. It's now September and I've got to remember what was in that training. Guess what? It's all in the debrief all the time. So it keeps you on point and it keeps you relevant to your own challenges rather than trying to remember what you did some months ago. So that's basically the online training. And then once all that's in place, we literally have got a season's worth of coaching and debriefs that we cover through on the course as well. You also get a book as well. I've written a book. It's not my memoirs, but it is just literally a hard copy of the book. So to be able to, of the training, so to be able to write in your own notes. You're watching a TV screen with the information, which is great, but you writing down your key elements, that your takeaways and your notes, is very, very powerful. So what you transfer in your own words onto the written page means that you literally fast forward straight back to it. So if you're looking at goal setting, for argument's sake, you open that page and you read your bullet points and it takes you back to all that information rather than having to go back and watch a whole video again. So your own notes are very, very powerful to be running alongside the training. And then this is what we achieved in 2021. So not the guys I work one-on-one with in the World Championship, but the guys that are doing, the guys and girls actually, that are doing the Performance Principles course in 2021. We got 8 championships from the people that were on that course. Mike Sterol won 2 championships. So did Marcus Tatchell. Andy Whale, Katie Hand, Scott Stone and Dan Jones all won a championship, and we got 144 personal bests, 214 podiums, and 121 wins in the championships that they were in, and they're at the bottom there. So we've got people, as I say, in New Zealand, in Australia, in South Africa, in India, in America, and in Europe and the UK. And they're all getting the benefits, which, you know, I'm really proud of the slide, because that's all the work that they put in and they've been able to apply and then see the results from it. So that's a great landmark for them all. And so if you're interested in wanting to know what your mindset is like, I've got a mindset quiz, which is literally just, again, some challenging scenarios. So you answer them as honestly as possible in how you would deal with those scenarios. The race orientated, but it still applies to quite a lot. It can apply to work, it can apply to other things. So it'd be interesting for you to fill that out and see which mindset you've currently got. But the good thing is that mindsets can change through training and through awareness. Then mindsets can move from one side to the other. So if you want to do the mindset quiz, I'll put the link in the chat, and you can do that and see how you get on with it and fill that out. And then if you wanted to know anything more about me or anything more about what we do, there's a website, which is caminocoaching.co.uk. So everything's on there that we talked about. And if you wanted also to connect, then LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook will be the easiest ways for me to be able to answer any of your questions directly, apart from what we're going to do right now. So that's about me. I'll hand it back to you, Jackson.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks for that, Craig. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to add that into the Q&A sections, and we can put those to Craig. In the meantime, I do have a few questions for you. I think this. I think the flow performance stuff it's really interesting. I think like you said, you can use it in all parts of your life. The question I have is how much of finding the flow mindset is actually about figuring out what you want, why you want it, and figuring out what you need to get there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it's connected. The flow is something that is available to everybody. Everybody on the planet has probably experienced some level of flow. You know, playing a musical instrument is a high flow environment. Painting, playing with your kids or your dog. A first date can be a really high flow situation. A meal with friends who you haven't seen for ages, and everyone gets your jokes, and time flies by, and everything feels great. And then the next month that you go out with some other friends, nobody gets your jokes, and you know it's all a bit hard work, and everyone's looking at their watch about, you know, ready to go. And so it becomes an environment, certainly for performance, that flow has got certain triggers and conditions. And what we've done is, over the last 20 years, the action adventure sports athletes have become the world's best at getting into flow. So anybody that was basically sponsored by Red Bull. So if you were a snowboarder, if you were a surfer, if you were a mountain bike, you know, rider and the like, everybody in those areas have been able to get into flow because they've exponentially increased their performance. And if they weren't in flow, they wouldn't be going home that night. So the consequence is very high for them. So it's sort of pushing them into that space. And then with the advent of EEG, so brainwave telemetry, we've been able to see what's going on in their brains when they're in that state. So Up until then, it was very mystical. It was almost trance-like, or sort of ninja type, martial arts, or spiritual, sort of meditation were the two areas that you get into this altered state. Whereas as I say, the adventure athletes have literally been able to get themselves into that state, completely wide awake, completely working. And so the conditions that they've created that's literally what we are now basing all of our studies on, is the triggers. There's about 22 triggers and conditions that allow us to drop into flow. And so the really interesting thing is that flow for me, and that what the triggers that work for me won't necessarily work for you, and vice versa. So we've got to find our own decoded pathway to be able to get flow. So if I'm working with a rider, it's about how Sam Lowes gets into flow. It's about how he, can recover and get back to it. And then Sam Wilford will need a different approach for how he's going to get into flow. So it's really about understanding that directory and then being able to see what works for each individual. But absolutely, goals and having a stake in the ground that we're working towards is really, really important. Basically, flow follows focus. So if we are focused on the task, so we're no longer daydreaming, we're no longer multitasking, we are literally just working on this task, it becomes all consuming. That's when we drop into that state. And anybody that's ridden in a flow state will know that, everything else just merged away. They have no feelings about what I'm going to do on Monday morning at work, or, even riding a motorbike, that run in the country is a flow-like state because you're escaping from the everyday environment. But when you're truly in flow, everything just clicks. You intuitively know what to do. Time flies by. You've been out for 5 hours and it feels like you've been out for 10 minutes, and that's when you're really in that state.
You mentioned multitasking. How detrimental is multitasking to achieve a flow mindset?
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to multitask and be in flow. And the problem that we've got in our fast-paced multitasking life is that we've got, we'll be watching a movie while on our iPad, while texting a friend about what we're doing tomorrow. And we cope with it all. We keep up with the movie, we keep up with what we're shopping online with, and the messages. And the problem that we've got with that is it's dissipating our attention. So if you can think of flow like a magnifying glass, it needs to have all that energy going into one thing only, and then we start to trigger the right conditions. But if I've got the music on, I'm having a chat in the corner. Actually, when you look at flow in the workspace, open plan offices are really unproductive for flow. Being on your own, and maybe people wear earphones to zone out a little bit, but being on your own and just working on that task is a lot higher productivity than, the sort of nice coffee machine, everybody mingling around and asking what they did yesterday. So it's actually, there's some real flow, conditions that we need to create.
Earlier, you were talking about mental rehearsal and knowing the plan of attack. Is that an important aspect of getting in the zone?
Yeah, well, there's two ways really. One, we actually want novelty in flow. So we're looking for what's new about the picture. If it's all going to be very formulatic and very organized, and this will happen and then that will happen. And so people that are very experienced in the same championship or have been to the same track an awful lot, that can be harder to get into flow because I know what's going to happen. I can predict what's going to happen, which is actually the wrong part of the brain. It's actually the prefrontal cortex that's taking over there in trying to have a strategy. And what we really want to do is we want to be mentally rehearsing a new level of performance. So that's novelty. And we want to run through all the scenarios that are trying to prevent us from achieving it. Because anybody can close their eyes and remember the track and go, yeah, this will all be great. And it's a nice sunny day and I'm on my own and it's all nice and easy. Then in real life, it's raining and you've got 30 other guys trying to steal your bit of tarmac. So there's no rehearsal actually happened because you have this idyllic version of life. Whereas when you've gone, right, I'm going to visualize myself being punted wide at turn 1 in the rain, and I've got to rejoin and work my way through the pack. When that actually happens in reality, the brain goes, oh, I've rehearsed this. So it doesn't go into panic mode. It doesn't go into, oh, everything's lost. And if it wasn't for him, I'd be all right, which is what everybody else does that isn't prepared. The person that's done the mental preparation is actually in a situation where they go, right, I've actually been here before in my mental realm, and now I'm going to apply it in reality. So you're creating a greater level of preparation.
How do you maintain focus on a race day when something you've been training for doesn't work out? When you've forgotten a step in a process, how do you prevent that from throwing your whole plan out?
It depends when it happens, because if it's in the process of preparation, then you're right. You need to drop the visor as you pull out to the holding area. I've done everything I need to do. I'm now ready for the next step. If you're, where's my visor? I haven't got a knee slider. 3 minutes before the hooter goes, I grab my helmet and out I go without any prep. Absolutely, you're going to be feeling, like I'm not prepared for. And that's where nerves come from. Nerves come from us not feeling prepared for the challenge. When we feel fully prepared, yes, we can still feel like, okay, I've got to be ready for this, but there isn't the same knot in the stomach because we feel like we have got the resources for our challenge. It's when we're going completely unprepared and we're trying to wing it a little bit, and then we get, well, what if this happens, and what if that happens, and all our brain again working against us. Our imaginations are our worst enemy because they come up with, they know all the buttons to press. It knows, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if this happened? Wouldn't it be terrible if I'd stalled it on the start? So all of those worries we've got, we don't feel prepared. We haven't had a process. So guess what? We're on a wing and a prayer. Whereas when we're in a situation that we feel, right, I've done my homework, I feel fully prepared, and I'm now ready for the goal that I've set, the challenge that I'm working on. Not, well, it all depends on what turn 1's like. It all depends on whether the 3 guys who are from the fastest championship turn up this weekend. I hear that a lot from people going, well, it all depends on who else turns up. But actually, our goals shouldn't be set on who else turns up. Our goals should be, right, based on me arriving, me doing my work, this is what I want to achieve. It'll be easier or harder with some people not being there or being there, but they've still got to be what we decide to work towards. Then, if we've missed something, the best confidence we can possibly have is to have no plan. When we've got real confidence that whatever happens, belief in my skills, that whatever happens, I can handle it, that's really where we're at our strongest, because then we don't really care what happens. Somebody gets away, okay, that's my job to catch him. I'm leading, okay, it's my job to lead, rather than my plan wasn't to lead yet, and now I'm leading, and what does this mean? And then we end up thinking about the guys behind us more than thinking about the track ahead of us. So when we have too much of a plan that we're trying to stick to, the problem is, if anybody you speak to, how often does your plan work out at a race weekend? There's too many moving parts. So we don't really have a plan that we're going to stick to. We can have a goal, but we don't have to have this absolute, step by step, that if that doesn't happen, everything's, thrown out with the baby's thrown out with the bathwater. But we're in a situation where if we've got real belief in our skills, okay, I've run through each of the scenarios and I'm prepared for each one of them. That's really the best place to be.
So I guess it comes back to that growth mindset. So for instance, if you were you're having an issue with a particular corner or something like that, and you're in the race, you keep mucking it up. So rather than letting that affect your whole race, you would park that, maybe try and improve it while you're racing it, but park it and then learn from it next time and say, well, this is probably what I did wrong. And maybe it's
So,
easier to do that once you're actually out of the race and you can actually reflect.
so the debrief will definitely help with that, because the debrief will be asking us about that level of performance and what we need to do differently. It's hard in the when you're out there and you're trying to achieve something and whatever else. But the problem is, in life, we're told if we've got a problem, so you've got a problem with a certain corner, you've got a problem, we should work harder. So you're not getting that corner right, I should work harder, which means that we hold the bars a little bit tighter, we try and break a little bit later, whatever it might be. And these are all this part of the brain, they're all the prefrontal cortex, and we're limited to how much information we can handle at that part of the brain. Subconsciously, we don't have any limits. Subconsciously, it feels like we can do an awful lot more. So what we've actually got to do is we've actually got to switch off. We've got to turn away from trying too hard in that corner and actually use some of the tools that we get to be able to relax more and actually be more allowing ourselves through that corner rather than forcing it to fit. So what the rider will generally do is they'll realize that they're tight and they are trying too hard in that corner and that section, and then they'll use some tools to try and change their approach to that, because the more relaxed you are, the better that you will ride. The more tense and the more that you are trying to force it to fit, the slower we are.
What happens after the race in terms of recovery? Because I guess once you're in a race, you're focused, and and that's taking a bit of a mental drain, I suppose. What's important for people to remember after the race in terms of recovery for their mental, their mental ability?
Yeah, it's a real big one, to be honest, because what tends to happen is we tend to be switched on. We tend to be switched on for the entire time. So if it went well, we want to go and talk to everybody about how well it went. Okay. If it went badly, I want to know what gearing he was on. I want to know what tire they were running. And we're having a great big debate about what we need to do to change the bike for next time. You see a lot of people that are still in leathers. They haven't been on track for an hour and a half, but they're still in leathers, wandering around, working out what to do for the next race or session or whatever. What we've got to do is a bit like we said before about that switch on and switch off. So we need to get out of leathers. We need to, make our decisions about the next session, okay, based on the information that we've got. And then we need to get ourselves out of our own way, because us reliving the previous session, reliving the previous race, isn't actually going to solve anything. It's actually about being more prepared to be stronger at the next one that's important now. So it's, again, in the race weekend structure, after the race, they've got a couple of bits and pieces that they're going to do, regarding the technical debrief on the bike, and maybe they're their own mechanic and they have to do it themselves, or maybe they've got somebody that's working on the bike. And then it's about, right, debrief with me, we talk about the goal for the next one, and then it's about getting yourself out your own way so you're ready to prepare and come back and be stronger. If you think of the brain, especially if you've been in flow, the brain like a jet engine, and a jet engine's the most powerful engine we've got to get us across the Atlantic or the Pacific. And then when it lands, the first thing it's got to do is it's got to cool the jets. On the plane, they've got to cool the jets to be able to take off again. And the brain's exactly the same way. You've been performing, you've been working, then you've got to cool the jets before you can go out and do it again.
I think we've sort of come to the end of the presentation. I just want to thank you for taking the time out today present for the Biker Bar. It's always good to have someone like yourself come in and present and share their wealth of knowledge. And I look forward to catching up with you again in the future. And
okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Craig.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Bye, mate.